I am Deborah Brooks, your chairperson. With me today are a variety of people. I'm going to go around the table, first with my colleagues, Jessica Melwani and Annette Malcone on the school board. Then we have Dr. Posse, our superintendent, Dr. Shields, our deputy superintendent and liaison, Mara Harvey, who's district counsel, Javiera, Central Administration Extraordinaire, and I want to give a shout out to Javi in a moment. And then we have a bunch of community members here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe about 9, a group. So thank you all for being here. I just want to say, well, okay, so we'll start with the agenda, and then I just want to give a shout out.
Okay. So good morning, everyone. You see that the first item on the agenda is just a reference to our minutes from the last meeting. The last meeting was only 2 weeks ago, so these minutes are here just as a resource. They will be on the board agenda on the 24th for adoption. By way of a personnel update, the board's aware that we're recruiting for our assistant business administrator. Ms. Mack is leaving us for another district, so that's in the process right now. We're also recruiting for vacancies due to our retirements. We look forward to sharing with the board at the 24th potential new positions for next year and getting a sense from the board on whether we should move forward on those or not. The third item on the agenda is our grading policy. The ask of us at the last meeting was to, the board shared with us a draft that we then brought to representatives of the PGCD grading committee, along with Dr. Baer and Ms. McLean. We met with them this past Monday. They were very helpful in giving us feedback for the draft. Then Dr. Posse and I sat down and tried to integrate some of those suggestions into another draft, working off of that same draft. So what I thought might be helpful is if I share some themes that sort of came out of that conversation with you, which maybe will help you understand why we recommend some of the changes that we did for your consideration. So I would say number one, the group was concerned about the length of the policy. Our policy that we currently have is 1 page plus a little, and this draft was about 7 pages long. So they were concerned about this being readable to a teacher who might sit down and want to get up to date on how they should be grading kids. That it was a very extensive policy. And they were saying, could we make this a little more reader friendly? And some of the language in there they were concerned was vague. Philosophical, yes, but not easily interpretable, shall we say. So they were hoping we could just make it a little bit more readable for someone who's not been sitting around this table like we have for months working through why we're doing what we're doing. Number two, they wanted to remind us that the policy is for children of all abilities. They asked us to look at when and how we use the words uniformity and mastery. You see through our draft, those two words are used quite frequently. So for example, for some readers, uniformity suggests that we assess all children in the same way. And they want to make sure that the ability to differentiate for all different ability groups is expected by our instructional staff. So maybe the word consistency is better than uniformity. They also brought up the word mastery as being something that we should strive for with children, but proficiency may be more realistic in what we expect from a wide range of learners. Also keep in mind that the word mastery is referred to when talking about Regents scores of an 85 or higher. And teachers are aware of that. And we just want to make sure that while we hope many children can get to 85 or higher, not all can. So mastery is not always the expectation, but the hope for children. And thirdly, I would say we should also keep in mind that this policy is for all 3 levels. And some of the language in the policy is very secondary focused. So sometimes we say something that we just know ourselves that we're implying for the secondary level. But if we don't state that in the policy, it will have implications for the elementary level. And I'll give you an example of that, like posting grades in the student information system. That's something that we expect at our secondary level, and it's not necessarily an appropriate practice at the elementary level. So after this lengthy meeting that we had with them, and I would say it was very productive, Dr. Posse and I sat down and tried to give another shot at it, but working off of your draft that you gave to us. It's now, I would say, about 4 pages versus 7, which is still much longer than the current policy we have. But our hope was to maintain the real salient points that the committee came up with, because that's important to the process. We have not brought this back to them at all for their review. We thought we should come and meet with you and discuss that conversation and sort of build upon it from there, with the expectation that we would go back to them at some point after this meeting. Dr. Posse, is there anything you want to add?
The only thing that I want to add is we spoke about the incentivization piece for Regents exams, and what our next step is. So, as you know, the committee did not come up with a recommendation for how to incentivize. So, what we've asked, what we discussed is that we will ask Dr. Baer to work with the departments to come up with ideas from the departments on how to incentivize Regents exams. And then I said to her that I would still like her to take those. There's not going to be, too many different variations of how to incentivize. So take the ideas that come from the departments and try then to reach consensus amongst the building. And we'll make sure that the middle school teachers who are teaching high school courses are also included in that. So that'll be our next step with respect to incentivization. So Dr. Baer is going to meet with her chair people. She's going to ask the chair people to go back to their departments. Once she gathers from them some ideas, she's going to try to develop a process so that the building comes up with a singular approach if possible.
And what is the timing of that? Because here we are in mid-March.
Yeah, well, she's going to meet with her chair people. She's got a meeting next week with her chair people. And then they'll need time to go to their departments. So, and then time to come back.
And so at this point.
The department meetings once a month.
And so at this point, it's now solely resting with the department chairs and Dr. Baer and the Weber Regents teachers. And are those ideas, after they bubble up to the surface and hopefully arrive at consensus, does that then become the law of the land, so to speak, or are there other levels that it has to go back and pass through to?
No, so again, the PGCD committee could not come up with a recommendation, so we offered them the opportunity to come up with a recommendation. They were unable to, so now we're moving to this step.
Okay.
And we spoke with the committee chairs, Dr. Baer and Ms. McLean, about that.
Okay, and so do you know, will the high school, and I guess Weber, be pushing for uniformity and consistency, or is it possible that different departments will have different incentives?
My conversation with Dr. Baer was that I would worry that we would be back in a similar position, and I don't think there are too many different ways to consider incentivizing Regents exams. So my preference would be that she work through a process with her building to try to reach consensus once those ideas are surfaced. There's just not going to be too many different ways to do it.
Agreed.
So
Understood.
once and she might try to come up with a few different ways with her chair people and then send a menu of options to the departments to get feedback on, maybe 2 or 3 different ways to incentivize to get feedback on, and then come back and make a decision. But she'll come up with a way to do that in her building.
And do you know if Dr. Bear has a deadline in mind for when these recommendations will be in effect, given that Regents exams are in June and we're trying to make this happen during this school year?
Yeah, well, and
for the students as well, so they know.
That's right,
They
and
feel in limbo.
incentivizing the exam should not be, it's not something that we think is controversial, so we think she should be able to come up with a recommendation. So
This is
we'll
a
let the
grading
process go.
incentive. It's clear, it's about a grading incentive.
Yes, it's not donuts or a pizza
Thank
party
you, I just
or
wanna be-
board at graduation.
Or a number on a transcript.
That's right.
Which is a reporting.
That's right, that was clear in our last conversation, and we made sure that was clear with the group.
Good.
And
There didn't
is,
seem to be any confusion about that.
and is the expectation that whatever practice rises to the top of this process will be documented either in regulation or the student handbook or Schreiber? I guess I just wanna understand where
Where it lives.
where it's gonna live.
Yeah, we didn't get that far yet in the conversation. Let's see what they come up with, and then we'll decide the best way to memorialize it.
Okay.
They might want some, it depends on how, again, if there are 3 different options, and let's say 2 of them are very, well liked, they might, they might want to see what the impact is before they commit to something for years to come. So we just did not get that far yet in the conversation.
I will say publicly, not only do we have maybe about 10 or so community members here today, but the board has been receiving emails, and I know they've been forwarded at least to you, Dr. Costa.
Yes, and I've shared it.
You've shared, from, I don't know, maybe a dozen or so community members who have reached out about this very issue in support of the words used in the emails are do no harm, that the Regents exams are mandated, the students should take them seriously, that if a student does well on the exam, that the student should not be, I don't wanna say penalized for doing well, but not rewarded for doing well, I guess is the best way to say it. So I just wanna publicly say that the full board has received those emails, and they have been shared with administration.
And just so the committee is aware, we did share that information with the group that we met with as well, that we have received, that the board has received a number of correspondence on this issue.
And the reason I say that is because we've heard from the student stakeholders and we've heard from parent stakeholders. And so those are 2 very important stakeholder groups.
And here in public.
And here, as part
And
of
on
the
Tuesdays.
parent stakeholders, yes. Okay, so,
So you and I had a conversation yesterday, and you said that the committee would like to look at the draft today and have some conversation around it.
Yes.
So I think it's very gracious of you to want to do that with such short time, but we're all ears.
and I also thank everybody at this table who was involved in getting us to this point today, because literally the committee got these drafts yesterday, I don't know, some point during the day. And I was on the phone with Dr. Shields saying, let's not wait until the April meeting. Dr. Shields was very conscientious of the fact that we literally got these less than 24 hours ago and didn't want the committee to feel pressured by administration. And I said, no, the committee has its own internal clock and internal pressure, and we're okay with moving forward today. And so I just want to say a particular thank you to Javi, because I know that there were a lot of different versions floating around at the last minute. You're allowed to leave your job when your job ends, but at 10 o'clock last night, Javi and I were still emailing, do we have the right version, are we ready to go for tomorrow? So I just want to say thank you. I even said to Javi, go to sleep. She said, no, this is what I'm going to do, so I just wanted to publicly say thank you. Okay, so now we have lots to do.
Deb,
So,
I'm sorry, but do we have the most recent version that you're looking at? Because the draft in the packet says 228 committee version, and it looks like it's the same version that I had from the last policy meeting.
so are there drafts, so we have even a clean version, are they posted to board docs? Okay, then I am going to can I share the clean version? Since we have it,
I can use mine, we can.
yeah, because I have 100 copies. If you can just, sorry, now you're seeing this for the first time. Actually, this doesn't show where the redlining is. Let me give you my redline version.
I have Word docs, if that's easier.
I don't know if it's on board docs.
Okay.
But yes, I have a version. We all got them last night at about
Okay.
10 o'clock.
Okay.
I listened.
Here's the red one, here's another version.
Javier, you making?
Yeah, I'm making a copy.
Hey,
It's okay,
Mara.
Mara, I'll make a copy.
I don't know, only because it doesn't have the crossouts on it.
Just red line version.
No, I think she was just saying it hadn't been made public. Yeah, the copies say not public on them only because they haven't been posted to Word docs, but there's nothing secret about them. Right. It was just so we didn't get confused with what the public had and what the public doesn't have.
And she's making copies.
Yeah.
Oh, and Poppy's gonna go make copies. Okay, but I'm gonna start anyway.
Sure.
So, and just for the ease of the audience here, the committee has looked at all of the language. It has been added, struck. We have our own questions. I will say that I think the committee will agree, as Dr. Shields said, much of what has been struck, taken out, redlined, is philosophy. So we were very heavy on philosophy in the draft because we wanted to stay at the high level. We didn't want to be prescriptive. So we started out with philosophy, which is nice. It gives tone and direction, but it also made the policy very long and a lot to read through. And we do understand that we want the policy to be reader-friendly so that it can be user-friendly. The most important thing is that the real meat of the policy not be lost in all the verbiage. So it pained me a little bit to see a lot of the philosophy taken out because I know how hard we worked on putting it in. But I understand why. And a large part of me agrees with, as long as we get to the end result and we've taken out the policy stuff, the philosophy stuff, I'm okay, personally. And I was very glad to see the purpose of grading, which I thought was probably the most important thing, was left intact. Untouched. So far. Okay, so I would just, I don't wanna jinx it. So I'll just lay that out there right now. When you look at the red line, oh my gosh, we're basically okay. So I will always defer to my colleagues first, so.
I would love to start with,
And thank you, by the way, because I know that, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. I know that the PGCD subcommittee, I know that Dr. Bear, I know that the two of you worked on a very short time frame to bring this up to us today, and I know that we appreciate that, so thank you. Okay, I'm done.
I was wanting to start with your summary and themes not only came through in reading it, but were really helpful to hear you describe here today. So when I opened it yesterday and saw all the red lines, I got nervous. And then as I read it, I saw all of the concepts that you described here. And I appreciate that you made it more reader-friendly, more user-friendly. And again, it's like teaching students to draft their writing assignments, right? We started at a intentionally very high level, but for the purposes of what the real world looks like, I think we've gotten to a better place with your advice. So I really, really appreciate that. I think you helped us move the ball, and I'm happy about that. as usual, and my big question was the incentive piece, so I'm glad you were able to address that for us already.
And it was left intact.
Yes.
That incentive language is still there, and it hasn't.
Unchanged.
Unchanged.
And from a policy standpoint, it's, you know, it's the incentive, it's the details wouldn't go in the policy, because you don't wanna have,
Right.
if things change or move, they have to keep on revising the policy.
So I found a bunch of the words work again.
Yes, I knew
Those are
that.
minor
I knew
and
that.
unnecessary to discuss here. I have one, I think, substantive question. On page 4. In our copy, it's the third paragraph describing, notifying, students and parents, about the dangers of failing.
Oh, I have a different version, okay.
In our.
Under what heading?
Progress reporting to
reporting.
parents, section 4. So in our version,
Yeah.
if I remember correctly, we had in writing.
Yes.
So can you please explain your thought process on removing the in writing?
I'm just gonna piggyback on that because I had it highlighted also. The words in writing were deleted and also no student can receive a failing grade without such prior written notification. And so my question was for those two things, why were those deleted?
Can we talk about the first one, the second one first? In terms of no student can receive a failing grade. We thought that that was problematic because if we get to, in terms of how to put that into action. So if a student has failed a course and the teacher did not notify the parent, what do we do with the grade? Was the box that we found ourselves in at that point. So that was the reason that we thought, you know what, we should really separate those two things. And the expectation is that teachers notify parents about, that's a professional responsibility. And teachers will uphold that professional responsibility of notifying parents that their child is failing, in danger of failing, or has failed a course. But to say that that the child can't receive a failing grade would, we thought, be difficult to put into action.
But if the teacher is required to notify the parents and we rely on the teachers to act, I wanna mimic what you just said, to use
What's
the
the
reverse.
reverse? What is the reverse?
responsibility.
What is the, right?
What harm would having that sentence, what is the harm of having that sentence there?
Well, because if a teacher did not do it,
What are you
What
expecting?
grade,
what do we do to the grade?
what grade do they get?
Like one, in other words, the professional responsibility piece, I think, is a supervision piece that we would address through the supervisory process. If a teacher did not do that, which we wouldn't expect. But the child's grade is the child's grade. And so it creates a little bit of an ethical dilemma for the administrator who's implementing the policy.
Except that I'm trying to figure out why, we didn't make up this language, a lot of this came from other policies, we were inspired by other policies. I don't remember which policy from which this flowed, but the purpose of notifying the parent is to make sure, well, number one, that the parent knows, but also if extra help is needed, the parent/guardian hopefully can step in and make sure that's happening.
Agreed.
And so if those things don't happen, then the child who may have been saved from failing, had the parent been notified, is now not saved from failing. I'm trying to imagine why the grade would change. Because you would be penalizing the child, if the child didn't get help. In other words, if there hadn't been a notification, and this child was just kind of let go, I'm not saying it necessarily happens here, because I don't know, but if it does happen, how do we make sure that this child doesn't fall through?
So you're saying the grade may not actually be an accurate reflection of the child's ability had they been
Had there been
presented with the
intervention.
opportunities that weren't required.
Yes, had there been
Had there been
intervention, and so it's a chicken egg thing, and I understand the conundrum you're talking about. But it's possible the child might not have received a failing grade if the parent had been notified.
Is there an opportunity here, perhaps not, because I hear what you're saying in terms of this is the grade, what do you change it to? You can't
Right.
just make up a grade.
I understand that too.
So is there language that we could incorporate here around remediation? Opportunities for remediation should this process not be followed, right? Should the student be offered an opportunity to
Like
bring their grade up, right?
incomplete or something, is that what you're talking about?
I don't know what the opportunities are in these kinds of situations, but should the process that is required not be followed, should the student and the parents not be presented with every opportunity to intervene, is there a remediation we can address here?
You know, I think the difficulty is is mandating that through policy, because ultimately what should happen is the building principal should be working with the teacher if something like that happened, knowing the facts, you know, all of the facts of the situation, and then working collaboratively to determine how best to support the child. I don't know that you can put in policy that, you know, if this doesn't occur, the student will receive a grade of an incomplete. I think that some of that is discretionary and should be left to the principal to manage with the teacher and the child. I don't know if you see it differently, Dr. Shields.
Can we say that then? Can we say if notification has not been given, that we leave it to the discretion of the building principal to,
Well, grading is the responsibility of the teacher.
yes, that's true.
So the principal doesn't issue grades, you know, we don't issue grades, the teacher is the only one that issues grades. Our responsibility as supervisors is to make sure that the grades are done in a fair, consistent, non-arbitrary manner. So that's why I was saying the two items are somewhat separate in terms of, you know, in terms of the child's grade and the supervisory responsibilities of the.
I guess as I read what you wrote, if this is abided by, the second should not be a problem.
Right, but if it's not
If
abided
it-
by,
yeah,
that was
if
my
it- yeah.
question,
It's the
if
big
it's
if.
not.
It's the big
And I mean, I understand that you can, there's the changing student
Yeah.
grades in this section that follows, but,
So,
yes.
because there was two sentences there originally, right? And it was very prescriptive. So what we're trying to do, because children get into these situations for a whole host of reasons. You know, maybe it's a long-term absence and they didn't have the time to get the assignments in. But maybe it's that the student really doesn't have the ability to do well in the course. And there's a whole list of other reasons as to why children get in this situation. So we don't want to be too prescriptive on the staff about how it needs to be handled, because each situation may be different. So I think this sentence sets a very clear expectation for our professional staff, that you have to make sure you're communicating with parents if a child is struggling. That's what we want them to know.
And why not in writing?
Yeah, you know what, we had
Be documented and.
We had a fruitful conversation about that, and I will tell you that the conversation went along these lines. If a student is struggling and we're asking the parent to help the student, we really want to encourage that to be a phone call, to be a meeting, to be an interactive conversation. They were worried that mandating it to be in writing would default to emails that may not have the same impact as a back and forth dialogue. Now, I think it's incumbent upon the teacher to document that they had the phone call, that they had the conversation. But I agreed with the sentiment that a conversation that is an actual dialogue with the parent is more fruitful than, in terms of accomplishing the goal of improving student achievement, than perhaps a letter that could be construed as, you know.
So do we include
Compliance.
something here to the effect of it is incumbent upon educators and administrators to document, you know, attempts to contact parents and intervene on the child's behalf. Is there something there that would help this?
Or we could,
In my view, that
It goes without saying.
it goes, yeah, in my view, that's, you're saying here that the classroom teacher is required to notify parents or guardians if a student is in danger of failing. So if a parent were to say, if I was the building principal and a parent were to say to me, Dr. Shields never called me, I would say to Dr. Shields, did you notify the parent? And it would be incumbent upon him to produce a record of that, and that could be his own notes.
Are we perhaps lacking, some reference to a plan for remediation or some kind of a indication that it's not just a notification conversation? So you can have a discussion, you can have intervention, which is the discussion, but what we're really hoping for is that there's an education plan for a student to not fail.
That is what our professionals are expected to do. Do we need to write that into the policy? I would tell you that
I'm
is
just
what that is what we expect our staff to do, and that is what 99 out of 100 do, depending on the situation.
Would it be helpful to clarify to your point, Nan, you know, with sufficient time to allow for meaningful discussion and educational intervention, right? So it's not just like a call as an intervention, right? That there's a on the ground, heavy, this kid is struggling. I don't want to use the term academic intervention because that's very specific, but just some sort of clarification there that intervention goes beyond conversation. Maybe it doesn't with some kids. Maybe with some kids it is a conversation like, hey, get it together and the kids gets it together, but I think for other students.
I do think that that's implied
That's
in this,
implied.
in
You
this
think that's
language,
implied?
because it says here, the classroom teacher is required to notify parents or guardians if a student is in danger of failing with sufficient time to allow for meaningful discussion and intervention.
So that's
So what is the intervention, right? The interventions are, you know, again, it's gonna be so
Could be any
case
number of things,
specific.
right?
It's gonna be so case specific about the particular child, but this is asking for interventions.
Yeah.
Is how I read it.
Is it a problem to your themes before? This is kind of a secondary issue, not obviously in elementary. So are we not making that clear?
I think if a child's struggling at any of the 3 levels, we expect communication with the families. You know, that we happen to have grades at the secondary level, that have letters attached to them, but if the child's struggling at the elementary level, we expect our teaching staff to reach out to families.
so we can say if the student is struggling or is in danger of failing. We can say if an elementary school student is struggling or a secondary student is in danger of failing, we can parse it through.
You know I'm not gonna accept struggling, we'll come up with a very fancy
Okay.
educational term that we can get from Dr.
that
Fossey
help?
and Dr. Shields.
Do you think that's necessary, like
It's
for?
really if they're falling below grade level, you know, then there's interventions that are put in place. Now, remember that there's an intersection here because this is about grade reporting. We have an RTI, AIS plan for the elementary level, in particular with protocols of what teachers are required to do and what the school is required to do to intervene. So, unless Dr. Shields feels differently, I don't see that as necessary because this is specific to grade reporting and we have an intervention plan. That's very fulsome.
And at the elementary level, there are regular routine check-ins and parent-teacher conferences. So even if a teacher hadn't notified a parent before November, December, that would be a natural time for this to be discussed. So
Well, this
I'm,
would apply to elementary too, which there is grade, I mean, you know, it's not the same way
progress
grades,
reporting.
it's, there still is, it's, 1, 2, 3, 4.
That's right, 1, 2, 3, 4.
So there still is the idea of failing in the elementary too.
You could say is in danger of failing or not meeting grade level expectations, and then that would apply, that would be more inclusive, I think.
Okay, and does that apply to students with a disability?
Yes. Because again, students with disabilities receive modifications and supports so that they can meet grade level expectations.
Okay, so that language
The
was
standard is still grade level
That's
expectations.
what I was asking, okay. Do we need to put in a sentence, a classroom teacher shall document? What?
But
I don't think you should, honestly, I think it's implied here. The classroom teacher is required to notify parents.
I think that could be handled also by like kind of training, you know, with regard to principals reminding, just like anything else. If you're having a phone call, you may, you know, wanna document, even if it's only, you know, just writing a note, spoke with parent at
In
this
your
day.
calendar, there's lots of places where you can do that.
Are you okay with this? Okay. Next
Um,
comment?
Nope, that was my only substantive question. And then the silly word.
Work and assignment, yeah, I already highlighted that for you.
I took a few of those, so. Yeah, I mean, I have some little word things, which I'm not going to raise here, and we can just put in red lines, like changing words like of to unit. We're not gonna, we're only gonna focus on substantive, conversations. So, in opportunities to demonstrate understanding of content, that's, we changed the header to that, I'm comfortable with that. Dr. Shields, your framing around the language, the uniformity versus consistency, the mastery versus proficiency, understanding versus mastery, I think all of that was really helpful because a lot of my comments were related to those word choices. In that first paragraph, it struck the phrase, with such opportunities offered uniformly to all students in each section of that course. To me, that feels critical to the meaning of what we're doing here. So I wanted to understand the removal of that and whether you think it remains addressed sufficiently and with clear enough expectations for implementation.
So the sentence then would began, this entails offering students multiple diverse opportunities to demonstrate what they have learned in a course, blah, blah, blah. And then it ended there with the revision, but previously had been, with such opportunities offered uniformly to all students in each section of that course, which is one of the things we've been trying to ensure was happening in the district, that you didn't have the luck of the draw by going into one classroom where there were hardly any quizzes or tests, which could be a bad thing or a good thing.
Right.
And then next door, they were being tested every single day. I'm being facetious, but you get my drift.
Yeah, so that is, I think our thinking on that, if I recall, Dr. Shields, was that we just thought that was addressed earlier.
I was gonna say, do
in the
we not
policy.
achieve it in the first paragraph of consistency? Where it says, as well as practices and procedures within departments, courses, and grade levels.
Where were you? I'm sorry.
Page one.
Page one,
Page one.
under consistency.
Yeah, that was language we thought was redundant.
That's what I was gonna say.
So when I read that, the consistent, well, I would amend that to say, in that paragraph, the consistency of grading practices and weighting of grade components. The consistency of, the consistent weighting of grade components simply means that tests are weighted at X amount, quizzes are weighted at X amount. It doesn't necessarily prescribe how many of each and what those are being delivered in the classrooms. So to me, these are not the same. The weighting is different than the portfolio of assessment itself.
So we had an interesting conversation around the concept of, you and I teach the same course, but my students are having a harder time with the concept. So shouldn't I be allowed to add in some additional assessments around that concept that your class may not need? For the betterment of my students, so they can get to the same level of proficiency that your students get to. So that's part of our craft as teachers. We shouldn't be told that
Right.
if you give 3 quizzes, I can only give 3 quizzes. I need to be able to differentiate for the audience that I have, even though you and I are teaching the exact same course.
So how do we how do we skin that cat then with one course only offering one opportunity as a quarter and another one having 10?
Is there some concept we can use about similar, meaning,
Or strive to have, maybe it's.
no, I don't wanna say strive, I think that's too vague, but I mean like in terms of, because what we're really asking for here, our expectation is that the experiences are similar, and we had this conversation with the group. If all of my tests are essay-based and all of your tests are multiple choice-based, that is not a similar grading experience, and that's what we're trying to get at here. We're also trying to get at, I'm offering a quiz a week so that students' grades are, each quiz has less weight, and then students have multiple opportunities to boost their grade. You're offering 4 quizzes a quarter, that also is inequitable. So, but we don't want to handcuff a teacher to say, your kids are moving faster, or need more time on a particular concept, so therefore. So is there some language, Mara, maybe that you could help us with that speaks to the concept of similar experiences? Because that would allow us, I think, the flexibility that we're looking for while maintaining the expectation that the board is.
Similar experiences with the goal of supporting students to achieve proficiency.
It's like
and-
substantially similar is what you're looking for. You're looking for it to be substantially similar. In other words, it's immaterial to me if one class gives one additional quiz because the kids did really poorly on a test and the teacher wants to reassess that material. That is immaterial, I think, in terms of the experiences of kids. But it would be material if one teacher gave 4 assessments and the other gave 10.
Well, it does say this entails offering
So how do you
students
say that?
multiple diverse opportunities, that we get around offering just one.
Yes.
Multiple and substantially similar diverse opportunities. Would that
I think that
be the
might
way
do
to
it.
address it?
Let's put it
Okay.
in. Between multiple, substantially similar, diverse opportunities, we'll see what it.
Yeah, we can like massage that with the words, but I think that's what we're getting at.
Yeah, and I think you understand how we're trying to build that flexibility in for the craft of teaching.
Yes,
And we understand
and I
what,
appreciate the comment,
and
I
we
think we can
understand
just
what the
pull out
board's thought
diverse
is.
and leave it substantially similar opportunities.
No, I do think diverse is important because you don't want,
Yeah.
you just don't want
Different
one
types,
class to be
yeah.
all project-based
All
and the other
multiple
to be, they
choice,
should,
right,
they
right.
should be substantially similar. But they should be diverse opportunities as well.
Okay.
Like they're two different
Okay.
concepts, in my view.
Well, it shows people learn and perform differently, so it gives, if you have different types of ways, someone may do better on one type of thing and another, and then it depends. Well, if I get put in a class that does the way I learn better, I'm gonna do better, but
Memorization versus writing an essay.
writing essays and.
So maybe this entails offering students substantially similar, multiple diverse opportunities to demonstrate what they've learned in a course, maybe something like that.
but substantially similar in front of multiple.
Are multiple and diverse redundant or?
No,
No,
multiple
but
can
if
be
you-
a
Yeah.
quiz
Yeah.
given many, many times and
Right.
diverse is the
Different types.
Right.
vehicle,
Right.
yeah. Yeah, multiple's the quantity, diverse is the quality.
Okay.
And then the next sentence, I think, really hones in on the concern that, in terms of clarifying, in doing so, no single graded assignment will have a disproportionate impact on a student's final grade. So that, I think the intent is very clear.
But if you only had one,
Right.
it would have a disproportionate.
Are we using the wrong word there in terms of saying it's a final grade, because it could be a quarter grade?
You could say quarter or final grade.
Well, I guess is the intent, because there's like the different quarters where you did the final, is I think the intent is it's not just the final grade, but it's each individual quarter grade.
Right, which
You could
is
say
why.
quarter or final grade.
Yeah. In the sections, 2 and 3 subsections of the core principles, opportunity to complete or make up missed assignments and assignments submitted beyond the due date. This was just sort of a general observation, that it looks like all of the language around providing supports and assistance to students in these instances was deleted. So I was just hoping for a little more color as to why those were removed. If it was just wordiness, then perhaps we can figure out a way to distill it to something more readable and usable. But if there was something philosophical there, then we should talk about that.
I had the same question.
Which subheading?
It's under opportunity to complete or make up missed assignments, there's a paragraph that was struck starting, students shall be given the opportunity and assistance required to make up all assignments missed as a result of, I would add, excused absence from class, et cetera. And then in the section that follows, assignments submitted beyond the due date, late work, there's a paragraph in addition, the last paragraph, in order to provide the classroom teacher with information that informs instruction, the school will develop and implement methods to ensure that students complete assignments, et cetera, et cetera. School staff shall work collaboratively to develop supports for this purpose. Is all of that simply implied in the role of a classroom teacher? Does it go without saying, or is there something that we should distill here to get to our point?
Yeah, again, our thought was that that's a professional that those are professional responsibilities of our teachers.
Yeah.
And yes, so some of it was wordiness, in the assignments submitted beyond the due date. Some of that we felt was vague, so maybe if there's a different way to get to the point.
Can we start with, because I had the same questions about why all that language was deleted in both of those sections. So can we start with the opportunity to complete?
Sure.
Or make up, right? Do we want to say, with the possible exception of absences intended by students means being an unfair academic advantage? And why do we want to delete that the student or the parent should discuss the teacher an appropriate means of submitting the missed work?
So that was language from our original policy. That the onus is on the student or the family to proactively reach out to the teacher to seek those opportunities if a student had an excused absence or an extended period of excused absences.
Which goes against the language that we now have about the danger of failing. It's the teacher's responsibility
To notify that the grades have reached a point where the student is
Which is
in
different
danger.
than making up missed work.
True.
Yeah, the sentence before that says, providing students with reasonable, consistent opportunities to make up missed work, turn in late work, and take corrective action based on feedback is key to nurturing continuous growth and improvement. So if I'm a teacher, I know that I need to provide students with a reasonable, consistent opportunities to make up missed work. And I think, again, supporting students in doing that is my professional responsibility.
Okay. And nowhere in this section, now that the section has been distilled to those couple of sentences, we're not differentiating between excused and unexcused absences anymore.
That's not what this policy is about.
The attendance policy does that.
The attendance
There's something in there
policy.
about makeup.
There
and
is,
missed work.
and it refers back to the grading policy, or there's a cross-reference to the grading policy. I just wanna make sure we have the
Cross-reference
cross-reference
here
here.
to attendance.
Yeah, there is.
Because we talked about that as with the committee as well, like, one of the reasons that the policy sort of grew into such a large document is that there's references from other policies that are put into this policy, and is there a way to not have them in here? So we were trying to find that balance, sometimes referring to what's in another policy is really helpful,
Yeah.
but sometimes it's stating something that's well-known in some other policy.
So perhaps in the same way that we refer to the Code of Character, Culture, and Conduct in the classroom conduct section, we can put in, so in that section, I'm skipping around here, I apologize. We say, it's later on, academic misconduct, including plagiarism and other forms of cheating, is subject to the interventions and progressive consequences outlined in the district's code of character, culture, and conduct. So it's very clear that if a parent was reading this, that they would have to go and refer back. They wouldn't have to go back to the end of the policy and look at all of our cross-references. Maybe there's something we can include here under making up missed assignments as a very clear reference that this is covered in the attendance policy. And I don't know that we need to work that language out now, but just a note that we're gonna go back in and include that.
Maybe refer to attendance policy.
Yeah.
Absences.
And I know this is also covered in the Schreiber handbook, so that may be another.
Yeah, and just so you know,
as well.
the attendance policy language is all students are expected upon their return to consult with their teachers regarding missed work. Only students with excused ATEDs are guaranteed the opportunity to make up a test or other missed work and/or turn in a late assignment for inclusion in their final grade. Makeup opportunities must be completed by a date specified by the student's teacher for the class in question. So it's clear, I think it's very
It's
clear.
clear there, I think, having a reference made.
Okay, yeah, so we'll do that. Can we, in the one paragraph that we're, attendance is on the agenda, so. We'll get to it today, but it's on the agenda. So in the paragraph that was left, can we simply delete the word however from the beginning of the second sentence? Because to me, however dilutes the sentence. And if we just make providing students with reasonable, is key to nurturing.
And I think that's where you kind of put the reference, providing students with reasonable to make up, consistent with the attendance policy.
5100.
Yeah, though, I mean, I don't wanna get into grammar, but like, the subject of this paragraph is students, when you start, that all students are expected to complete classwork, and then you switch to a philosophical statement that actually does have an agent, right? The classroom teacher should provide all students with reasonable whatever. So I think we can nuance that a little too, just to get
The grammar.
the grammar right, and the accountability is clear, like this is what students are responsible for, this is what teachers are responsible for.
Right. In other words, the teacher has to provide the opportunity, the student is still responsible
For doing it.
for doing it, yeah. Okay.
And according to the attendance policy, the student or the family is responsible for seeking out the opportunity upon their return.
Well, I mean, I can understand that because if you have a classroom with multiple students absent, it's puts the responsibility needs to be on the student to have agency to make up the work, but it also has to be, it's a partnership.
Yep.
The classroom teacher has to permit that to happen. That's what we're saying.
Yep.
Okay.
Do we wanna look at the paragraph around the supports in the
Yes,
next
under
section?
assignments submitted beyond the due date, yes, I also, there was a sentence in the end of the first paragraph, work submitted late shall not be penalized if the reason for lateness is considered acceptable, etc. I questioned why that was deleted and also why the following paragraph was deleted. And sometimes there's a reason why the work is late. And so we're saying, don't penalize a student who has a valid reason for lateness. That sentence was taken out.
Right. Again, I believe that's just an understanding of the professionalism of the teacher, that if you have an excused absence, you're not gonna be penalized for it. If you have an unexcused absence, that is gonna come into question.
And that is covered in the Schreiber handbook around like the 85% rule, and your grade won't be impacted if you make up all the work.
But you don't have to be absent to turn in
late
something
work.
late.
That's true.
But again, the assumption here though is that if the teacher feels that the student's reason for lateness is reasonable, then they're going to,
And they have the ability to.
they they'll do what they need to there. Because it says here, assignments submitted beyond the due date will be accepted to document student learning. To encourage assignment completion by their students, departments shall establish reasonable guidelines for accepting assignments beyond the due date. So we're saying that you're going to establish reasonable guidelines for accepting assignments beyond the due date. someone may say, this was the conversation at the table, some may say, well, what are the acceptable departmental guidelines for acceptance of late work? There are no published acceptable guidelines other than what's in the attendance policy and, so obviously hospitalization, excused absences, things of that nature. But other things might be more, dealt with on an individual basis between a student and their teacher.
Does accepting an assignment clearly imply that the assignment will then be graded according to the same rubric as if it was not late? Just because something can be accepted and documented doesn't mean that the grade will not be affected by its lateness.
Which is why we had that sentence in there.
Right. So if
The short answer to your question is yes, they should be applying the same rubric to the assignment, whether it's on time or whether it's late.
if the
there's
reason
an
for
ex- if there's an
lateness is
excuse,
acceptable
yeah.
according to departmental guidelines, which is what it says here, like
Right.
the departments establish reasonable guidelines for accepting work beyond the due date, accepting assignments beyond the due date and grading them according to the same principles as if they were not late, right?
Well, so let me ask you, are we saying that, so again, assignments submitted beyond the due date will be accepted. To encourage assignment completion, department shall establish reasonable guidelines for accepting assignments beyond the due date. Those guidelines might be a deduction of points based on the fact, for each day that the assignment is late. In other words, the way that I read this is that we're saying you cannot go to an automatic 0 if you have missed a deadline for an assignment. The departments, though, can come up with some sort of penalty structure.
Yes.
If appropriate, for accepting late work. So that's where it became,
Right, so the
bit
language in
unclear
here
to
no
us.
longer addresses the reason for the lateness and whether the reason itself is deemed acceptable by the classroom teacher. So in instances where a reason for lateness is deemed acceptable,
We don't want this.
we don't want the student
penalized.
to then have the assignment go into that grading structure where they're then penalized for each day that it was late, even though the teacher has.
So if they're at I don't know, some kind of a competition and they miss the second half of the school day,
Sure.
that's an excused
It's excused
absence, it's
absence.
considered late, so do they lose points?
Or what if they weren't late and like there was a fire in their home and their books burned, and right, like there are all kinds of things where like it might not be absence related, it might just be it was late and I couldn't do it and it was a totally reasonable reason and I will get to it when I can.
I think we haven't, but so teachers are gonna have to make judgment decisions, and those decisions can always go through an appeals process if somebody feels that, they disagree with the decision that a teacher made. But I can't think of an instance where a teacher would deduct points and that be upheld by an administrator for those reasons that you just articulated.
But then are we unnecessarily putting students and families in a position to go through a formal appeals process and figure out how to navigate this? I mean, I respect that is probably a really strong edge case, like that almost never would happen.
Right.
But the policy should be protective in some way.
I mean, personally, here's how I would like it to read, that second sentence. I don't even need to encourage assignment completion. I could start with departments shall establish reasonable guidelines for accepting assignments beyond the due date. Work submitted late shall not be penalized if the reason for lateness is considered acceptable under departmental guidelines, blah, blah, blah.
Under established departmental.
Yeah. I think it's important to say that the board does not want assignments are submitted late to be, that the board recognizes there are circumstances where students should not be penalized for submitting late assignments beyond the due date. And that message needs to trickle down.
The inverse, but the inverse of that, you support as well.
Tell me how?
The board supports that sometimes you're going to need to penalize a student for
Yes.
late assignments.
Well,
So-
Yes,
so
but
if
not
that's
if the
true-
reason is acceptable.
Right.
Only if the reason's acceptable under the departmental guidelines, which then.
If the reason is unacceptable, there is a penalty structure for.
Right.
so, I mean, could we do something to the effect to encourage assignment completion where students' departments shall establish reasonable guidelines for accepting student assignments beyond the due date, which differentiates excused and unexcused reasons, or, because I think that's what it's the people I have an excuse, whether it's I'm at lesson, I'm at a competition, house burnt down,
Right.
whatever it is,
Oh, can we stop
It's,
saying that?
that is excused, and when they hand in the work, whether it's the next day or in a week, which is in accordance with the guidelines, there should be no deduction. But if someone just didn't want to do their work, and that's up to them, they're able to decide to not do their work, but then their parents realize it and they said, you're doing your work, and now you handed in late, I think, you're probably not going to get full credit for it. You're gonna get less credit for it. I guess you probably don't wanna have a situation where you could choose to not do it when it's due and do
No, I
it
think we
later.
agree that both situations are valid and they will occur. It's just how do we acknowledge that both of those exist within this policy?
So the language in the attendance policy is only students with excused absences are guaranteed the opportunity to make up a test or other missed work and/or turn in a late assignment for inclusion in their final grade. So that policy also doesn't say, just to flag for you, it also doesn't say without penalty, you know? It just says, or turn in a late assignment for inclusion in their final grade if it's an excused absence.
So do you think that that is acceptable, that it could be penalized?
You know, it's a hard thing to legislate because there are so many nuances that, so in other words, if I have given a project that is a 3-month project that has a due date, and I expect students to upload that project to Google Drive, you know, I think students should upload it by that date. Now, if a student was hospitalized, of course, right? But if a student is homesick that day,
Well, we have that in here, don't we? Like using it to
that
their
could be for the
advantage to not.
unfair. Yeah, but again, how do you prove,
That's how.
Oh,
it's like, how do you prove that? To do that, they've tried to do that
That's
for
very,
an unfair
I understand.
advantage.
yeah.
That's
you
where the
know?
professional judgment's really important.
So that's where I think the teacher has to engage with the student, if it's a high school student. Have the conversation and then make a decision based on the facts that the student has put forward to them.
So maybe to encourage assignment completion by their students, departments shall establish reasonable guidelines for accepting and grading assignments beyond the due date that, accepting and grading assignments beyond the due date that account for excused, unexcused absence, however we wanna sort of frame what we're accounting for in those departmental guidelines that they're establishing. The reasonableness of the reason for the lateness.
I think the reason.
Or just accounting for the reason for the lateness.
Because it could be, you may not be absent, so it could be, my grandmother was in the hospital,
Right.
even, I'm in school during the day, but I didn't do it
Right.
because I was.
For establishing reasonable guidelines for accepting and grading
That
assignments
take into
that take
account
into account the reason for the lateness.
And just offer one other alternative, what if you said something, this is not clean. It's a little bit of flow of consciousness, but what if you said something along the lines of, teachers are expected to use their best discretion when determining whether or not points should be deducted from, whether or not to deduct points for missed work. Because again, the premise of this entire policy is that grading is left to the discretion of the teacher, and that grading needs to be consistent. So that's why, the reason that I'm struggling is because this is a hard thing to legislate, because there are so many nuances, and we want teachers to have, I think, maximum flexibility. And our assumption through this entire policy revision is that teachers are acting professionally and that they're, that they're looking out for the best interests of their students, because that's what we know of our staff. So can we simply put a nod to that in the policy to address your concern?
Yeah.
It says something like, teachers are expected to use their best discretion when determining whether or not to reduce points.
On a late assignment. Or an assignment submitted beyond the due date.
Because I think that indicates
I
that
think that works.
the teacher does not have to.
Right, and that it's not a one-size-fits-all situation. Thank you.
You got it.
Getting late, ladies.
Yeah, well, it's okay. We're here.
We got a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
More?
Yeah, so did we address the paragraph that was struck in the following around the rationale for the language, for omitting the language on appropriate supports? So where we say school staff shall work collaboratively to develop supports, for this purpose, those supports may look different at different schools. Was this removed simply because it was redundant and aligned with the or implied in the expectations of a teacher's work?
Yes.
Okay.
Does it happen?
Yes.
Consistently, I think is the question.
Again, if it's not happening, that's a supervision issue that we can address outside of the policy.
I can get on board with that. In this section, right before student ranking, we've struck the weighting of academic quarters. This version has struck the weighting of academic quarters. Personally, and conceptually, I'm okay with the elimination of that from this policy, simply because we weren't saying anything that changed or directed implementation in any way. However, this is where we retain the language around not penalizing students for initial failures that are associated with new learning environments and new material. So is there a way where we can get that back in? Because I think that is an important philosophical goal of the board.
My question is, why was it deleted?
Because it was not understood to what it meant. From a fresh set of eyes looking at it, again, going back to we've been through a process together here. When someone reads that with new eyes, they said to us, what does this mean?
How do we better explain what it means then, so that something can stay here?
What are you intending for the action to be based on that statement?
Well, our concern, I think, is for the next 30 years that this policy doesn't get reviewed again or weighting doesn't get changed. Just to make sure that, I think we were talking about the beginning of the school year, where students are coming in off the summer, they're readjusting to school, where the first quarter was weighted heavily, or more heavily, or less, or whatever it was. We wanted to be sure that the students, during the beginning of each year, especially when the ninth graders come in, that the students aren't being penalized for having to learn a new system, for having to be in a new school, for having learn a new course, for all the newness that comes with everything being new.
I think a piece to that though, and tell me if it's changed, our students often change teachers mid-year, or they used to. Is that still the case?
Meaning if they take a half-year course?
Like a half-year course, sometimes the English department even had like,
They have half-year courses that make up like English 11, for example. You might be in two different courses.
so this is even a January consideration, not just September.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the core of this was around not penalizing students for initial failures, whether it's on a quarterly weighting basis or on the weighting of course assessments and materials, right? That whether it's by course or by quarter or whatever it is, that we're giving students some grace to acclimate
To new
to
courses.
new courses, new materials, new teachers, new environments. Some of them are, adapting to an entirely new school in some cases, so.
So then this really is not about the weighting of the quarters.
For me, it was never about the weighting of the
It's
quarters.
really philosophy, I think.
Excuse me.
I know the discussion that we had had at the table was, kid who's taking first AP class, takes that first test and is like, oh my God, I did not, did not.
But it's actually bigger
I
than
mean,
that.
well, but even like taking an honor class, the first, and the discussion was not getting a student to turn around to go with their guidance counselor and say, get me out of this
Or
class.
even just getting used to a new teacher with a new teaching style, right? I mean, I think that's something that every kid has to learn how to face, and they're resilient and they figure it out. But sometimes there's a learning curve, and they're not performing up to their capabilities or even what they know they themselves are capable of.
So maybe again, it's a statement similar to what we talked about before, where it says teachers are encouraged to, and there's somewhere else. I think what was
Yeah.
confusing was the heading, weighting of academic
Yeah.
quarters.
Yeah,
Since we're not addressing the weighting of academic quarters in the policy.
So,
But I think what's related to this is having multiple and diverse assessments in a quarter, right? So if a child is having a hard time transitioning into a new course or into a new teacher's style, multiple assessments should mitigate some level that transition point.
I agree.
maybe.
And maybe that's the point where we can incorporate just some additional language to drive this point home.
Because you're
Maybe,
very clear about that
Yeah.
earlier in the policy.
Yeah.
so in that section that's under opportunities to demonstrate understanding of content, perhaps there's a sentence that can say, students shall not be penalized for the initial failures typically associated. Can we massage that into that section, that paragraph?
I think you just have to work on the wording.
Yeah.
The concept, I think, for sure belongs there, but
What I'm hearing is that kind of language around students will not be penalized could be difficult to implement,
Yeah.
could be
What does that
vague in
mean?
terms of how to interpret it
That's
on a
so
classroom
it's
basis.
more the term you keep referring
Yeah.
to is teachers or educators will be encouraged to.
Yeah. I think you can figure that out.
Okay. Within that, opportunities to demonstrate
Yeah.
understanding of content, opening paragraph. I have a note here, massage wording and put in opportunities section.
But I think the phrase of do not penalize is the problematic piece.
Okay.
Right.
So
Because if the grade is,
work around that.
because if the grade is in the record, it's gonna potentially bring down the grade, but if you mitigate it by putting in kind of more
multiple assignments.
Yeah. So I just had a few overarching questions, and these are in part for our administrators, in part for us to think about as a board. Is the policy's intent and objective with respect to the need for consistency of grading and assessment practices across all sections of the same course in all buildings still explicitly clear in this policy as it's written? Are we comfortable that we have addressed that? Because for me, that was a core issue in this policy.
Doctors, are you,
I thought that it was very clear.
I
Okay,
think
very
it's the-
clear.
The first paragraph of consistency of grading systems and practices.
And in terms of implementation, the regulations would clearly reflect that, I would assume, okay. With respect to future changes to the grading system or practices, is the philosophy on not moving the goalposts on kids mid-career still explicitly clear in this
Yes.
version now that we've moved stuff around? And are we comfortable that the policy still provides the, the protections and the flexibility that we're intending?
I don't remember where it is, I'll find it.
I actually like where it was moved.
Yep.
Yeah, because I noted it was
Yeah.
moved and stuff came out around it, and I just wanted to make sure that we were all aligned, that like this accomplishes what we needed to accomplish.
I like where it was moved, I don't remember where
It's
it was
under
moved.
weighting of courses.
Yes, because that's what it pertains to.
Right.
Yep.
So the language says to ensure that weighted grades are directly comparable across
Yes.
a graduating cohort and reflect in the final grade point average, the GPAs of all students within a cohort will be calculated according to the same course weighting that was in place when the cohort entered the district high school.
Right. So that we've narrowed it down, we've narrowed the focus to the GPA, and I noticed that we did take out language around this, the way this issue kind of looks at the course level, because that would be very, very difficult to legislate, and we came up against that conflict in our last meeting, so I'm good with focusing it on GPA and course weighting here, as long as we're all aligned that this does what we need to do.
Yes, I remember reading that and saying it made sense there.
Yep.
And it protects the kids who are currently in their process now, and gives them that consistency and clarity. From your perspectives, is it clear in this policy now that this, and we say this in the last paragraph, I think, that the superintendent or their designee is responsible for establishing the grading system? And because we get to that so late in the policy, is it clear that all mentions of said system refer to that which is then developed by the superintendent or their designee later on, right? Because we refer to the established system, the grading system, and then at the very end, we say, the superintendent or their designee is directed to establish and implement comprehensive regulations and procedures consistent with this policy, but we don't say that the superintendent is responsible for establishing the grading system. Is that what we're trying to say? Is the accountability here clear for you in terms of what the regulation will be, who's responsible for developing it, and what we're referring to throughout?
Isn't the grading system the regulations and procedures?
That's my
Or are the
understanding.
regulations and procedures the grading system?
That is my understanding, but if it's not, I feel like we need to clarify it throughout.
Okay, is directed to establish and implement, we can say a comprehensive grading system, comma, regulations and procedures. Do you want that explicitly in there?
Is it that or is it no comma grading system regulations?
Grading system regulations? Because, I mean, consistent with this policy, it's the grading policy, so I think it's redundant to say grading system regulations, because it's not gonna be homework regulations, it's not gonna be attendance regulations, it's with this policy.
I agree, I just wanna make sure we're not gonna see like a grading system at Schreiber that's separate and distinct from the grading system that the superintendent develops in this policy, and a grading system at the fourth grade, right? Like, I wanna be very clear about what we
That it's
mean by the term
superintendent.
grading system
There's
and
a
who develops it,
superintendent who
yes.
develops it.
Because there may be different systems that develop in different places that would be kind of overseen by what the superintendent develops, but which the superintendent would not necessarily address in district-wide regulation.
How
For
about-
example, we already spoke about how the elementary teachers all are grading on a slightly different system
Yeah,
than our secondary teachers. That's okay, that's developmentally appropriate.
I guess the question is really for you and based on your conversation with the subcommittee and, you know, some of the issues around interpretation and vagueness of the language, is that clear? Are the references to grading systems and the regulations and procedures to be established by the superintendent, is all of that clear in this policy?
I think so. I mean, I hope I'm interpreting them correctly, but I think so because, you know, I interpret, as I said, it says I think the language throughout the policy is clear on what the intention is, that we're looking for consistent grading systems at each level of schooling and practices and procedures within departments, courses, and grade levels. So like one practice that the building principals could implement is they could ask for the course syllabuses at the start of the year to just make sure that it's in line with the policy. It's pretty standard practice. Most principals do that in high schools. I'm talking about at the high school level in particular.
Can we say the superintendent or the designee is directed to establish and implement comprehensive regulations and procedures that create and govern grading systems consistent with this policy? Does that make you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea that the regulations and procedures developed by the superintendent will govern and direct any systems that may arise in buildings would clarify it, perhaps. Maybe we just need to play around with the language there, but I just wanted to make clear that, or to clarify, if it was clear, if there was anything that was gonna be left up to interpretation that we needed to address. But it sounds like I think those were all the substantive comments from me. Yeah, okay.
So I'm just gonna get blunt because it's 11:21. So on the first page, under core principles, where we say elementary, middle, and high, under consistency of grading systems and practices, should middle and high be secondary? Should it be elementary and secondary, or do you wanna keep it elementary, middle, and high?
I prefer the three.
Okay.
Because I think you have already alluded to the fact that there are some high school courses taught at the middle school which have to be in sync.
Got it, okay. Under timely feedback to students, the second paragraph. The word originally was students must be given access to all graded work within a content, including assignments, blah, blah, blah. That was changed to should. So why was it made more lenient? I interpret should as being more lenient than must.
I think that was done throughout the policy.
There are a couple places where must was kept.
Must and
This-
shall and required are still sprinkled.
Must, to me, must and should are different.
So we had a conversation around primary age students that some assessments are done with 5-year-olds that don't necessarily have to be handed back and reviewed with the child. Most are, but there might be, some assessments where there should be some flexibility built in.
At the elementary level, a lot of the work is done portfolio-based, where, teachers might be working on the writing process from, throughout the course of the year. That work is not necessarily returned with enough time to review their work, process feedback, and seek additional support, because that's all happening in the classroom level. So this is where we came across the difference between secondary and elementary.
Okay, so this is super important for the secondary students. So how do we fix this to make it because should to me is just a little too permissive.
Guess you'd have to say at the middle school and high school. But then what would you want to say about elementary?
So we could say students at middle and high school must, and students at the elementary level should. We can parse it that way.
And is it graded work like you're describing at the elementary, or is it not necessarily graded work?
It's not necessarily graded, like
Right.
where you're, it's like the assessment, the assessments at the elementary level are more formative in nature than they are summative. And at the secondary level, there's a combination of formative and summative assessments.
Because this has been, I know in your time, so you precede my time, certainly in my time, I don't know if it's still going on, but it was a recurring issue and one that we were really trying to stop
So what
by,
if we said summative assessments? Is that clear? In other words, so if it's a assessment that has received a final grade, essentially what we're saying then is that must be returned.
well, it says all graded work.
Right.
So I think in
Well,
elementary.
We assess kids in different courses in such different ways. So this sentence is trying to capture all those ways in one place, which I think is hard. So an English teacher at the high school level has 25 papers that were just turned in I can't give you the next writing assignment until I give you these back, is what you're saying in the language here. I don't think that's your intent, right? I think what you're saying is that the kids need feedback on that assignment.
yes.
It's about
So
the
they can
feedback.
upgrade their next assignment,
Right.
right?
Yes, as a writer, I would like to know how I could improve my writing before I have another writing assignment.
Right, but it doesn't mean
That's-
you shouldn't be writing until I give you back this piece of
Correct, you
paper.
should still be writing, but maybe they're not graded assignments,
So
maybe they're.
that's why I think the must versus should needs a little bit of nuance.
But in a class such as math or science where there are building blocks, I mean,
Mhm.
English is more fluid, and I understand you need the building blocks in English too, but the course material, even in a foreign language, the course material builds upon unless you start a different unit, the progression throughout the term is based on building blocks of skills and understanding things. And if you don't get the first basic skill in algebra, you may not be able to move on to the next building block. And if you're not getting that feedback in time for the next exam, then if what you didn't master or show proficiency on in the first, you can't build upon it in the second. And that's the problem, it's pouring salt on the wound, really, and adding injury upon injury. So that's what we're trying to avoid here, where before a teacher can move on and basically retest a student with new material, but still based on old stuff, so it's kind of like a retest. You need to allow the student the opportunity to learn from their mistakes before you can go forward, or it becomes a vicious cycle,
Philosophically, I
right?
completely understand what you're trying to accomplish.
And so that's why the
But
must
when you
came in.
when you put in language like must, you are handcuffing staff to be able to work with kids sometimes unintended. So the unintended consequence wouldn't be known until we look at every variation of how we assess kids in every level of course. And I just don't want to put you in that position accidentally.
How about every classroom teacher should make every attempt to give students access to all graded work? Is that better? It's somewhere
I
between
see
must
that
and
as-
should.
I see that as the same, but I see that as the same as should.
What we're trying to say is that you should not, because the intent is that if I'm giving a test, before you sit for the next test, you receive the feedback so that you have enough time to improve.
Yeah.
So how do we, maybe this is clear, I mean, because it says here to maximize learning before the next assessment can be given. But their concern was about the process that's more formative in nature.
So maybe then.
Like writing assignments, those participation-based courses, projects. They don't want to not be able to say to the student, okay, I just collected your essay, and I'm going to grade this essay. Your next writing assignment is, but get started on your next writing assignment. For like someone that's just continuously giving feedback on writing.
But I think the question is, can that next writing assignment be due before the student? Like, it's okay to get going, right? Like, get started, keep writing, but until you have that feedback back, from the teacher, you shouldn't be graded again. To me, that's, like, these are
Make the
the
same
grades,
mistakes.
the graded assignments are checkpoints, right? Checkpoints to see if you're learning what you should be learning on target, on schedule, and then given an opportunity to improve on it. So I don't actually think we're saying anything that we don't want to be saying here, even with some types of formative assessments. Doesn't mean they can't give the assignment.
So why don't you revert it back to must as you had previously, and then let us talk it back through with the representative group to see what, to see what the issues are.
Should we include, I know, back to Nan's least favorite word in this policy, we could change it to graded assignments.
Assignments, yeah.
I don't know if that changes anything, and we could also then say including summative assessments, so that formative assessments at the elementary level are definitionally excluded.
I also think that most of the assignments in the elementary are excluded because they're not graded. So, you know, you have all those writing and the building on it, but for the most part, there's no
Right.
grade on it. It's
Are
learning
those
on it.
available then, right, because those happen and then nobody sees them besides the teacher, right, they're for the teacher's purposes, but is that work then, or that portfolio of work then available to parents upon request based on our student records policy? Like, can parents see all of their students' work in formative assessments?
Absolutely, yeah.
So maybe we need a cross-reference to the records policy? Okay. Mara, does that make sense to have a cross-reference?
No, it does, because I mean, there's definitely gonna be some interplay here.
And maybe to emphasize the importance of why it should be must, we should, maybe we start the sentence with, to maximize learning before the next assessment can be given. I don't know, that changes the meaning. Because we're basically saying you can't give another
Right.
assessment.
You can't grade the next assessment until the work is right, like you can't require that a
So
student turn
English is
in-
hard, because like, so like with math, like, the same kind of thing, like if you don't know what you didn't know, it makes it hard to then, if you think you got, I mean, usually if it goes into a test, they think they're doing it right, and then when they get the wrong answer, they learn, oh wait, nope, I didn't really know that. And if they go into the next lesson, kind of saying, okay, this is how I do it, and it's wrong,
Right.
they're just gonna carry forward the same mistake.
I think
Right.
I still think it's
But
similar
English
with
is a
writing.
little
I think,
different.
no,
I
I
think
think
it's similar.
it's similar, yeah.
So let's
If you
replay
didn't
with,
provide your 3 points of evidence, you didn't use the
Right.
inverse pyramid, you didn't, right, like
You didn't use a.
a piece of statement,
Right,
whatever.
exactly.
So what if we struck within a content unit, what if it's students must be given access to all graded work, including summative assessments, with enough time to review their work, process feedback, seek additional support, and maximize learning before the next assessment can be given. Within a content unit, is that necessary? Because does that necessarily imply all of those mid checkpoints?
I agree, and I would also add before the next graded assessment can be given, so teachers should feel free to assess student work and capability as much and as often as they want.
So we're saying they can take a quiz, but they can't take a unit test?
No, anything graded, but they can't, in other words, you can say to the student, your next writing piece is like a homework assignment. But see, that's the
it's tough,
problem.
everything gets graded.
Like the homework assignment, like all of these things that, especially if it's like a writing piece.
I mean, some get graded on completion, right? Like, bring it in, let's talk about the work, if you did it, it factors into your homework grade and you get 100 for your homework.
So can I do that in this policy if I'm a teacher?
Work graded on completion? I would assume so. I would think so, based on reading this, but do we need to be a little more specific? Or be more lenient?
I think graded work is different than like, a check plus because they submitted.
Also, grades go into GPA, well, not all grades go into GPA, but
But-
certainly at the high school.
Right, but that homework that you just assigned the day after a test is gonna be graded. But that test might not be back. So you're
So that-
saying they can't grade that next day's homework because the test wasn't returned?
Maybe all graded work is the issue. Maybe it's students must be given access to summative assessments with enough time to review their work, process feedback, seek additional support before the next summative assessment can be given.
I'm okay with that.
What's the difference between a summative assessment and a quiz, or is a quiz a summative assessment? 'Cause I don't know the.
Well, it's really the graded work. I'm thinking like where, in other words, what I'm trying to get at, maybe summative assessment is inartful, maybe there's a more artful way of saying it. What I'm trying to get at is before you give back your that a unit assessment is different than a homework assignment, that's different than a classroom assignment. You know, an assignment is not an assignment. Everything might be graded in the classroom.
But like a checkpoint
varying
quiz is
degrees.
different than a unit test, and a homework assignment is different than an essay.
And what I think the board is not trying to do is say that, you know, the teacher can't continue working with can't
We
issue
want
assignments.
students to be able to learn from their mistakes.
Yes.
That's really the bottom line. Before they can, we want the students to be able to demonstrate proficiency, and the way to do that is they need to learn from their mistakes, and the way they need to do that is to get the feedback in a timely manner, so that's what we're trying to do. We're not trying to crack a whip in the classroom, we're just trying to make sure the students have the opportunity that they deserve to have.
So if we limit it to maybe all graded quizzes and tests, I don't know how that would work with English. I don't think that would work with English. Because it's not the homework and things like that, it's the,
Do now quizzes, it's none of that.
but I
I
don't
mean,
know
the
how to
opening
translate
paragraph
that to
says what we
English.
want. It's the timely return in order to allow, to afford a student the opportunity to learn from their mistakes. Should we just try to maybe, because I see the time, and I'm sure we have community comments, and I really would like to get through my other comments. Can we try to maybe work this paragraph so that? Okay. We'll do that. All right. On page, at the bottom of that section, the timely feedback, the very last word in that section is mastery. Do we want that to be proficiency? I'm just trying to be consistent in our consistency. Yes.
Right before opportunities.
Right
to
before
demonstrate.
opportunities to
Paragraph
demonstrate
underneath.
understanding of content, the word mastery is there, it's a picky thing, but do you want it to be proficiency?
I'm sorry, I don't know.
So, in
I'm
addition,
looking
at the middle school and high school level, every graded assignment and assessment must be reported in the student information system within a time frame that is,
So you're in this sentence here. Just look at the one. So in that phrase, it's progress towards content mastery, it's not saying we've achieved it.
Okay, so mastery is okay?
Yeah.
We don't need proficiency.
Because we like that philosophical statement, right? We're all working towards mastery.
Okay. A lot of my comments are already taken care of, like that. Under final exams and state mandated summative assessments, that would be little section 4, IV. The first sentence now, when a locally developed final exam or other locally developed summative/cumulative assessment, the assessment will be given to all sections. Why was same taken out? Was same redundant?
No, a teacher might have different versions of the assessment. So in other words, like to prevent cheating, if I have
Reorder.
5 classes,
Oh.
I might give version A to class period 1, version B to class period 2.
Okay, so and then can we just say that assessment will be given instead of the assessment?
Yep.
The incentive language, you left in the important part of the incentive language, so I was kind of wondering why, with the goal of driving results and stuff, but I figured that's superfluous, so as long as the incentive part was left in, that's fine.
Yeah.
Under academic achievement and classroom conduct, where it talks about, academic grades, I just put in the word shall reflect student learning, and then student work was taken out, but then it was student work/study habits, but then in the last sentence of the paragraph, work is still there, work/study habits. So I didn't know if it was work habits is the same as study habits, does work
I think we should
come in or
cut the
come
word
out?
work. I think we should
So-
take the word work out because you can read it as student work, which
That's
is
fine.
not what we mean, right? We mean
No
work
problem.
habits.
Okay, under weighting of courses. So we struggled with what it means to have an advanced course. pretty much at the beginning of when we were drafting the policy, that for some students, a Regents level class is an advanced course for them. And so we reverted to something that was more objective rather than subjective. And now that the word advanced is back in, and it goes beyond the state learning standards is out, I fear that we've reverted to the subjective and we've gotten rid of the objective. So, can we simply say, courses that go beyond the state learning standards will receive additional weight in a student's cumulative GPA as determined by the superintendent? Because I had two problems with the sentence. The first was taking out the go beyond the state learning standards, because I think that's what we meant by advanced. But also the way it reads now, it's advanced courses as determined by the superintendent, meaning the superintendent determines which courses are advanced or not advanced. So is it okay to say courses that go beyond the state learning standards will receive additional weight in a student's cumulative GPA as determined by the superintendent?
The only reason that we had struck go beyond the state learning standards was because in some disciplines, so for example, we might want to offer a dual credit class in CTE, in the future. And if you're getting college credit for the course, it's not necessarily beyond the state learning standards, because the state learning standards, it's an elective-based course. So we were just trying to maximize the flexibility there to be able to identify courses that might receive weighting. And those courses would typically be courses that go beyond the state learning standards for the core discipline areas. And then for other areas, they might be dual enrollment courses, it might be career and technical courses that lead to a certification, something that's determined to be robust. We were just trying to increase flexibility.
Can we then say courses that go beyond the state learning standards as well as other courses as determined by the superintendent?
Yeah, I think you could.
Okay.
Read back that sentence.
Yeah.
Yes, so then it would say courses that go beyond the state learning standards, as well as other courses as determined by the superintendent, will receive additional weight in a student's cumulative weighted GPA.
Maybe say as well as other advanced courses that, as determined by the superintendent?
Do you think is it less wordy just to say courses as determined by the superintendent, or do you want some sort of qualifier?
I think it's important to say that go beyond the state learning
want the
standards.
Or to just be more specific and to say advanced courses such as honors, AP, dual enrollment, or, including but not limited to honors, AP, dual enrollment, and others as determined by the superintendent will receive additional weight. If the state learning standards
As
is
well
not
as-
a barometer that we want to introduce.
As well as other courses, maybe dual enrollment,
Yeah, we could put parentheses.
because I know we're really trying to get away from advanced.
Right.
Okay, we'll flash that out. And then I think,
It was implying value to a
Yes.
certain student
Yes.
and a certain student's
yes,
content.
it was subjective as opposed to objective. That's all I had, because everything else, do we need to add the vision and mission? Because it was taken out of our philosophy, I think, somewhere. It was, we want to add vision and mission to the cross-reference.
Do we want to add it?
Yes.
Is the question. I mean, I think this whole policy is aligned with the vision and mission, but we don't reference it specifically.
All right, that was it, because the two of you got all of my questions. Okay, we are not gonna get to the rest of our agenda. Come back in April, but, maybe May, maybe June. Do we have time for community comments? You good with that? Community comments. None?
Do we kill it? We just like
None?
killed it?
I'll make my usual community comment, which is to thank all of you once again, to thank the committee, the administrators, the teachers. And I do appreciate Ms. Brooks saying for the record that there is a large community presence here and acknowledging that the community has been sending in letters. This is top of mind for a lot of parents and especially for the students. It's March. It's mid-March and regents are in June, so I know mental health has been mentioned as a reason for addressing this, and the kids are aware that it's uncertain what's gonna happen with their regents exam, so I appreciate the forward motion, so thanks.
No other comments? Oh, yes, hello.
Thank you for the opportunity. I just, there's a few things in here that it goes back to the comment you were making about the section that, they struck the must and they struck the uniformly applied. I think there's been an issue, and I think this has been brought up in this forum before, where there's a major issue in terms of uniformity within a course amongst the different sections being taught by different teachers. And I feel like by taking out the comment or the phrase uniformly applied in that section, which was meant to, I think,
I'm sorry, what section?
timely feedback to students.
Okay.
So I think that takes away from what we're trying to achieve, which is to create uniformity amongst, just the way the students are graded within a course taught by different teachers. So I just wanted to sort of raise that issue, that I think one of the goals of this grading policy should be to create more uniformity and equity amongst the students who are taking a course with two different teachers. And I feel like by taking this out, and there are a few other areas where by taking that out, you're kind of, it's counterproductive. And the other thing is, I don't think there's the other issue where some teachers give extra credit and some don't. And also the extra credit they give might be much easier than what the other section might be giving. And I feel like that's not addressed within this policy, as well as the idea of extra credit. If one teacher is giving extra credit, then for a particular course, then the same opportunity should be given by the different teacher teaching that course, because that makes a huge difference. It could be the difference between a B+ or an A, or an A or an A+ within a course.
Okay, so let's address, so for under opportunities to demonstrate understanding of content, the last sentence in that, I'm sorry I don't have the page numbers, is any practice that enables a student to improve a grade must be consistent across sections of the same course.
Where are you?
So, I'm not sure what page it's on, but it's under opportunities to demonstrate understanding of content.
The last sentence,
Last sentence of the first paragraph in that section.
right.
Page 3.
Moreover,
Does they say course or grade?
Does that in theory also then include extra credit? Because right now that's not.
It says, for
offering
example,
extra credit assignments is in there.
it
Okay.
says, for example, dropping the lowest test grade of the quarter, allowing graded test corrections, or offering extra credit assignments. Must be consistent across.
There's a lot in here, so, and I
Okay,
understand.
that's
maybe-
fine. And so
but on
what about the uniformly
So the
applied?
uniformity, we had talked about uniform and consistent, we had that word, it was almost on every single page in this policy, and
We
it's,
discussed it at the beginning of this meeting, and I think we got to the fact that it was in our first paragraph under consistency of grading systems. For graded work to achieve its intended goals, it is crucial to maintain a consistent grading system at each level of schooling, as well as practices and procedures within departments, courses, and grade levels.
right, and we had
Is that what
taken
you're
out,
looking
we had
for?
taken out uniform.
Right.
So, and
So then why is it that then it was struck from the paragraph uniformly applied, timely feedback to students? Why not just leave it in there then?
so at the beginning of the meeting, Dr. Shields, you identified that as one of the major themes that came out of the conversations with our educational leadership. that the word uniformly has implications around student capability and student ability, and that the word consistency is perhaps more equitable and allows for students to not necessarily need to fit in a particular mold and a uniform system rather than a consistent system. Is that what we heard earlier?
Yes.
We also talked about adding somewhere in the policy language that says substantially similar, some phraseology like that in a portion of the policy, because what we didn't want to do is handcuff a teacher from being able to give additional opportunities to students if they felt that students needed those additional opportunities, whereas another section of students may not. In other words, if one period of my class, because of whatever has happened, needs some additional time where they do substantially worse on an assessment than another period, I might reassess that, but not have to do that in another unit, in another period section. So that's why we're trying to give a little bit more flexibility, but still clearly state that the intent is that the sections are substantially similar.
Okay, I mean, I guess I have to sort of chew on this a little bit, and if I have more to add, I will email you guys.
Great. We're here.
Okay.
I just had a quick question. Under the weighting of courses section, the last sentence where it says that students within a cohort will be calculated according to the same course weighting that was in place when the cohort entered the district high school. So does that mean that the recommendation is that, because I know we were talking about moving next year from a 1.0 course weighting for the advanced courses to a 0.3. So are we saying that for our current freshmen, sophomores, and juniors next year, they will stick with the 1.0 course weighting?
That very topic we've been discussing, because there's implications for the implementation phase of this. That we are looking at the technology side of this decision that the board is making, that cohorts must be weighted the same way throughout their entire time in the graded years, shall we call them. Because those graded years begin for some students in 8th grade for their high school bearing credits. So we're looking at having to do this by cohort and not with one point in time.
Yes, it's the response to what the parents brought to our attention back in the curriculum committee meeting last year, whatever that was. Yeah.
Right, well, and the idea that the technology
And the students.
could presumably support that if we dug deeper with Infinite Campus or.
So the short answer is yes, that is the
That is the
implication.
intent.
That any
That's the
student
intent.
currently
Policy is
enrolled in high
driving us
school.
towards that.
Yes, and I often wonder what it would look like if we didn't have the technology and we're just back to, the old.
I know.
Yeah.
I know that
But
we do.
I said that out loud.
Year one.
So, are there any other community comments? Because we need to have some direction as to where this policy is going next. We have a school board meeting.
Just one quickly, it's kind of the same thing that I think I brought up last time, is that now, it exists in weighting as we just discussed with not changing within a cohort, but to change other aspects of the policy does have implications for overall GPA. Like if we're removing the regents, and it increases the overall GPA for a significant portion of our students within a cohort. Like if you take the students in AP Physics, some take it junior year, some take it senior year. That regents helps many of their grades. I don't know that based on our data that it harms anyone's grades. If we remove it, we've now created an imbalance within that cohort. And the language regarding that is now removed from the document in this current version.
It does harm some of the students' grades. We shared that data at one of the previous meetings. And the other thing to recognize is that it was not universally accounted. So in other words, Physics may have counted it one way, English didn't count it at all, social studies a different way, and different levels counted it differently as well. So that's why one of the reasons that we recommended moving that to the course weighting piece was because it would be going back to the way that we did it previously was very inconsistent depending on the course and the level. It's not like we had
It was wildly inconsistent.
It's not like we had a universal approach to it that we could say, okay, let's all go back to this approach.
Right, so it's, I mean, my read of the policy is that the language around a grading incentive on something like the Regents is a counterbalance to the conflict that was created in the policy itself when you look at the course practices versus the overarching practice. And we've had to like wrap our brains around this too, sort of accepting some level of imperfection, right? Not sacrificing the great for the perfect, and getting towards a world where there is consistency and students are rewarded for their efforts. So I think that's where this policy lands.
Yeah, there are so many permutations, we understand your comment perfectly. But to revert to what the Regents had been, which was, I think this was a huge, what's already occurred in trying to get the consistency is very important, because some students were benefiting from it and others weren't, and that just wasn't right either, just in terms of who decided to use the Regents exam as a final and who decided not to, and so forth and so on. Okay. Another comment?
Really quick too. I understand the process that's now being taken with the departments to look at the incentives at the high school, and I just wanted to clarify, is then the goal to align the incentivization between the high school and the middle school, so that ultimately that will, whatever that looks like.
Yes,
Be
the
the same.
policy requires it to be standardly applied.
And at this point, is a potential incentive still on the table, the do no harm approach to Regents that many parents had advocated for? Is that still something that is on the menu of potential incentives surrounding Regents?
Well, the incentive itself is only do no harm, because it's only if the grade, the way that it's articulated, if the Regents grade is higher than the average of the 4 quarters, there'll be some grading incentive. So that in and of itself it's not gonna harm anyone, in other words.
So it's, okay, so
No one's
regardless
grade
of
will
what
be
the
reduced as a result of
So
the
it could
Regents
only
exam.
be an increase in the grade based on,
We talked about a positive.
Performance on Regents.
Did we say a positive?
A positive grading incentive.
Positive grading is,
Goal and incentive also implies positive.
but is the word positive in there? I think, can't even remember.
It was,
what
we can
was.
check and make
Yes,
sure,
if it
yeah.
was there, then it's still there.
But yes, it is a little redundant as well, because it wouldn't be a
It would be an
disincentive,
incentive
right?
if,
Positive.
Yeah,
Bringing
the
it
grading
down.
system
Positive.
shall provide a positive incentive that encourages student effort and achievement.
and then otherwise it wouldn't be.
it would be
Because otherwise it would
incentive.
be negative,
Not
and that's a,
negative, it's
that's a
only
violation of the
Okay,
policy.
okay, good. Right, just wanted to make sure I'm just-
Just our intention. Okay, so, I would like to see this policy going for a first read cleaned up. I am only one person on this committee.
I think it's unanimous.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, please, please, please.
I think
So-
we need fresh eyes on this too, like we are too close at this point.
So what we need to do, my policy friends, and I know you did it overnight, basically last night, so I know you can do it again, is to clean up what we discussed and put it on, and we will figure out a draft that doesn't have a whole bunch of red lines through it and somehow, well, I guess we'll work.
We're gonna do it.
Probably
We can
will
do it.
work off of this
Yeah.
version, so that it would be very easy for Dr. Passe and Dr. Shields to see what we have changed for today. And we'll just call it the March 13 version for first read. Because if any of you knew how many versions we've gone through this, and we've tried to keep a library, I guess. So we'll put this on for first read, understanding that things can change during and after the first read, but I think it's important to get this in front of the full board. Is that okay with the two of you?
It is, because, and simultaneously, as I've shared with you, we will bring the latest version back to the constituents that we had a meeting with on Monday, and see how we're doing.
Thank you, because it seems to me that when you outlined the themes that the committee brought to you, that you executed those things, I think, very brilliantly and
Tried.
tactfully
We tried.
throughout here, so hopefully they're happy with what you've done, because we've basically accepted, I think, just about everything.
And we
We haven't
appreciate,
seen it yet, so.
I think, you know, their input was well taken and much appreciated. It's always good to have somebody tell you to use fewer words and as writers to not, you know, fall in love with your own words. So I think their themes were very much appreciated, so thank you for bringing those to light.
Yes.
Really helpful.
Okay, so we are coming back here on the 24th of April for our next Policy and Personnel Committee meeting. And so we hope to see all of you there. But if not, if things are rolling along smoothly with the grading policy, as I hope they will be, we'll understand. Yes, we will understand. Okay, so at that, it's 12:02. I am going to stop the stream so we can all move on with our day. Yes, thank you.